Hey folks, just to introduce today's conversation on the art of expression, it's such a tender one, and I'm joined with Dr. Bronce Rice. He's a psychoanalyst and psychologist, and he's author of the Wellbeing Equation on Substack. I heart recommend that you go and check out his Substack publication. What I love about Bronze is that not just that he gives his professional expertise and shares that with such generosity, but it's his humanness. He is constantly championing the creators and practitioners and writers on Substack. And his own writing is one of such honesty and vulnerability. And it makes me exhale and feel less alone whenever I read anything that Bronze writes. And you may have well have heard the expression that we are all student, teacher, and master all at the same time. And I think when those who are showing up as experts and leaders in whatever arena, in whatever area, when they are willing to say, hey, I'm just figuring shit out too, more and more, I sense that that is what we are all craving deeply. So, in this conversation, we talk about why finding our voice isn't always simple, why courage can feel like walking through hell at times, and the hidden complexity around being visible and putting our magic out into the world, whether that's in podcasting, in writing, or in simply speaking more and more of our own truth. And in line with that, uh, when after rewatching this conversation, I could see so many moments where I could have gone deeper or could have just teased more out of Bronce and his decades of wisdom and experience. And I think that's the thing when interviewing someone or talking with someone who's just brilliant in their area is you can walk away seeing all the threads that you didn't pull. So hopefully a part two will be inevitable, but I hope this meets you gently wherever you are, and I hope that you're being gentle to yourself wherever you are, and please enjoy. Dr. Bronce Rice, welcome, welcome. So
Thank
happy
you.
to have you on the Art of Expression, Bronce. Delighted. I think we've actually just had a fantastic conversation for half an hour that could have been part of this.
Very easily, very easily. I enjoyed it. I'm glad to be here.
Ah, Brant, I'm so grateful for your time and energy. It's so beautiful of you to do this. I would love for you to open up with what it is, because we've met through the magic that is Substack. So I would love to
Hmm.
for you to speak a little about what you write about, who you are, what you do in the world, what your Substack is about. Would you tell us
Yeah.
more?
Okay. Okay. I think I kind of write about, well, what I think kind of maybe is health and wellness, well-being, probably aspects of the human condition. I mean, some aspects of healing. So, I'm a psychologist, a psychoanalyst. So, kind of help people explore, who they are, why they think and feel the way they do, what are their dreams, what are some of their yearnings, fears, anxieties, what helps them, get up and get out of bed in the morning, what keeps them if they're, fearful, what keeps them under the covers, so to speak.
Mm,
Yeah, just kind of, I want them to kind of understand more about why their mind, works the way it does. And I've got some family dynamics, history, those kind of things, I guess is, and I do most all of what I do kind of face to face, one-on-one. So a lot of privacy, um, kind of talking about kind of meaningful things, what's their purpose, they have goals. And so that's a little bit about what I do and a little bit about, I guess, kind of what I write about.
mm,
But my, Substack's called the Wellbeing Equation. So that's kind of, if you think about certain aspects that you love to do, and maybe when you feel the happiest in life, you know, I want to help someone kind of understand well, how did you get some of that? What happens when you kind of are out of touch with that part of yourself? And, you know, what helps you get back in touch with that aspect of kind of like health and wellness, well-being. Some people would call it, flourishing, uh, I guess. And so it's a little bit about me and my Substack, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're helping people to thrive and not just survive, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that's right. No, what helps people think about that? And not only in terms of how to kind of engage with those aspects of oneself to bring that, into fruition, but also kind of like what in life kind of keeps us from it, diminishes that ability within ourselves. And do you understand what are those dynamics, both to help propel us, but also that help kind of like or hinder us, right? Rather. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned the wellness, the well-being equation rather there, and you because you speak about moving beyond the cookie cutter kind of
Yeah.
wellness trends, which I think
Yes.
probably we're all a little wearisome. We all find we're kind of a little fatigued by. I would
Yeah.
love for you to speak to what that kind of unique fingerprint of the well-being equation, how how it's different for each and every one of us, how that concept might apply to not just health and well-being, but also to our creative expression and to our putting our our voice out into the world, or in what however that might look for us. And a secondary question to that might be what your journey has been in that, like kind of coming into Substack, for example, being visible in that way, which I think is
Yeah.
quite a new path for you, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes. Um, I think to kind of like creative expression, in some ways, I think that an element of that is that you're doing something in a way that's really kind of works for you. It's there's something kind of, you might have worked at it, but it feels like it's yours. It's authentic. You're doing something that you kind of, you may love it. It helps you connect up with yourself and the world in kind of unique ways that I, I think kind of the creative aspect, because it's a little unique or different for everybody, to be creative in a certain kind of way in terms of to be able to do that, be in the midst of it, you know, I often think about it as terms of there's an element of interest and interest or an element of play that you're letting your mind kind of just go, your body kind of go with something in a flow state that I
Mm.
think is healthy for us, right? If you look at, the research with the children, it happens for adults too, but you see it more with children where they're just in play and they love it and they're kind of putting their heart into it. And what they show is that kind of cortisol levels are lower at that point. And so if you can kind of get into the creative expression and enjoy it and play with it and not worry about are you doing it right or not, you might want to
Mm.
get better at it if you're focusing on some craft. I get it, but there's something in there if you can enjoy it. I think it just helps with the human condition in certain ways. So
Mm.
that's a little bit of the kind of the creative aspect. Our voice is an interesting thing, right? Because I think implicit in that is that, you might learn from other people. You might internalize aspects of kind of like parental dynamics so that if you go out and do something, that you're not supposed to, so to speak, that maybe you want to do, you know, can you allow yourself to enjoy it? Can you have a voice in relation to something that you're engaged in and not have that critical element um, as front and center? That's an interesting endeavor in life. So I think, that has showed up here on Substack for me. I've talked a little bit about it elsewhere, but um, like I enjoy it, what we're doing, but I also find it to have an element of anxiety in some ways. That there's a preference not to do it, um, and yet, in some ways, it is helping me think about, well, given kind of my own well-being equation, how does that voice show up for me? And, we're all a little different, and so like I could kind of ask you in terms of, well, given what you do, whatever that is, how would you go about finding your voice? And what would that bring up for you? What would it mean? And for me, there's a little bit of a kind of, hey, there's some yearning, there's some desire, some interest, some passion, some meaning, but there's also, some anxiety, some worry, some fear,
Mm.
right? And so just a mixture of things as I try to find my voice, you know, I get kind of the aspect I'm going to hit upon where, you hear about, well, you're going to find your voice. And kind of, I think a lot of people kind of hear that as if, well, hey, that's a good thing. There's going to be a lot of positives in that. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's true. But it, it all, at times, it almost misses some of the fear and anxiety, the worries and anxiety that comes with it.
Mm.
Right. And is that a good thing? It's like, it depends. I think that's the implication, right? But to
Yeah.
find one's voice I almost hear it. It's like, well, okay, well, I guess that's what we're supposed to do, right? And I'm like, I get it in terms of kind of like kind of maturation development, in terms of learning to be figure out who you are, what does it for you, and to be able to put those things into place in terms of a way that you like and you enjoy it, and it helps the quality of your living. So me, there's an element of, well, that's what I'm trying to figure out my voice in terms of, well, I know how to help people do that. I'm good at that. But how do I do it? And
Yeah.
how do I help myself do it? You know, that's an interesting kind of, it's been an interesting journey.
Mm. Yeah, it's really interesting because what I thought of there when you were talking was an athlete who perhaps finds flow in chosen, whether it be running or gymnastics or whatever, they absolutely love it. But then when it comes to competing, it's a whole different game ball as regards kind of dealing with anxiety, nerves, comparisonitis, all of the things. And I
Yeah.
suppose I kind of think of myself like I love writing and I love having these
Yeah. Yeah.
conversations, but then when they suddenly become visible, it's like a whole other
Yeah.
gamut of like a Pandora's box of expression, isn't it? When we're kind of think, oh, if we're actually people are going to be reading this, it's fascinating,
Uh-huh.
isn't it? Fascinating.
No, 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 no question. Like,
Um,
say, I've heard you talk to us a little bit about shame, right?
um,
And, for a lot of us, it's an element kind of having to figure out, well, what do we do with that? Is that part of figuring out what our voice has to contend with? Um, so if I ask you to speak, here, right, as we're doing publicly about shame, and then let's say you say something that you're worried about or whatnot, it's going to raise stuff that it's like, I enjoy writing, but no, no, but here's an element. It's like, oh, geez, maybe I don't love that part. And what do I do with that? Like how much do I share? How much do I keep to myself? I
Mm.
I think that's an element of Substack, where
Yes.
where I've had to say, hey, I love the writing. If you just ask me to put out my writing, I'd still have to kind of like, okay, well, what about edits and what people are going to say about them? Do they like it? Am I going to feel critical about it? But
Mm.
it's a whole other piece in terms of, okay, so I'm going to come on and talk about myself and what I do in relation to writing. It's like it almost feels
Yeah.
like two different things. And,
Mm.
yeah,
And that kind of touches on what we were discussing before, that whole kind of people are kind of craving authenticity. Because I know that when I read your notes, you wrote one last night that was really, really touching.
well,
And it's like a
remember you
huge,
wrote, you responded to it in a touching way.
oh,
I mean, it
I
was
know, but I wouldn't have
right.
done that. It was only because it was like you inspired me to respond in
Yeah,
like because of your
right.
courage, and I love the knock-on effect of that kind of
Uh-huh.
vulnerability, that courage, that kind of just that kind of saying, hey, just
Yeah.
that being honest, and I really appreciate that, about your
Yeah.
writing very, very much.
Well, and so you hit upon something, right? That the theory then holds that we want to see individuals who are authentic, right? And that the theory there is that since I've written something that's a little bit more, open, vulnerable, that then maybe it helps, somebody else
Mm.
feel like, hey, I can connect to that experience. I know a little bit about what that's like from my own personal experience. Let me then share a little more because maybe this person knows something about it, and maybe it'll be a little, safer in a certain way. So there you have an idea, at least in my mind, right? Where maybe that's where it can be important to have a voice, for your own edification, your own maturation and growth, but you can have an element of your voice that may help others do the same then, or at least something that helps them with their voice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really magical ripple effect. You said in your reply to me on that note last night, you said you used the expression "courage flows like water," and yet why does it sting, rip, and twist like this? And I
Uh,
felt that. I was like, yes, why?
yeah.
Would you like to delve into that a little deeper for us? Why can
Well,
it be so, like, I don't know about for you, but afterwards for me, after showing courage, there can be like a whiplash. I don't know whether that's what you meant, but tell us more.
yeah. Well, yeah, I think the move towards kind of being online and speaking from the heart, I think it touches into aspects of healing, and so I think with healing, right, and in regard to creative expression, one's voice, I think wrapped up in there is you're like a more of a whole person, right?
Mm.
And so for me, that entails the whole, scared, worried, what if people see, mm, what I don't feel is so lovely,
Mm.
right? The water, the twisting, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, so I guess I need to figure out how to be in touch with those elements and have a voice. Really? Is that what I want? Yes, no, right? So it's complicated, right? There's a complexity and nuance to it, that I think for me, the experience of kind of what we're doing and being on Substack, it has kind of like asked me to, for me, it's one thing to kind of do that in the privacy of my own therapy, for the privacy of my own self. It's another to kind of like, okay, you're going to ask me to, or I'm going to ask myself, like what, like, I'm going to ask myself to do this? Like, really? But anyway, that's a little about what you picked up on there and some of my
Mm.
response, right? Because I'm kind of like, all right, so if I'm going to go beyond kind of cookie cutter, all right, but let's go beyond cookie cutter then, right?
Mm.
This isn't like 10 ways to magical spiritual healing. It's like, okay, sure, I can think that way. I can even probably present an article if that's what somebody asked me to do. But are they going to talk to the complexity of the twist and the flow,
Mm.
right? Like that's, to me, that's where the magic, but for me, it takes me quite a while to kind of get there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a kid, right? Um, Part of the voice, right? I'd stutter, right? And they sent me to reading classes for a few years because I didn't want to read in public, right?
Right.
My mom knew that I could read, right? She knew that. Um, she's a school teacher, so she helped me read, and she knew that I was confident in reading. But then there was something when I would go do it in front of others that I didn't want to do, and then I would stutter, right? Anxiety, and so it's like, well, okay, so it's a good thing to find your voice, right? And I'm like, well, is it? It's like I don't think it's that easy, and then you think, well, maybe
Mm.
that's just me. I don't know. I'm not trying to say that because I have it, everybody else is, gonna have
Mm.
it, right? So yeah, that's a little
Yeah.
bit of what you were picking up on, and I'm like, okay, so if we're gonna, you know, be authentic and talk about healing and authenticity, it's like, all right, well, for me, it's like, eesh, it's not that easy.
Yeah. And I think my sense is that it's the very reason I started this podcast. First of all, I called it Unmute Yourself, and then I've changed it to the Art of Expression, was because all the training I've done in recent years, the amount of coaches or practitioners or healers or whoever you're kind of in a Zoom room with or whatever, the fear is the next is now putting out their magic into the world, actually being seen.
Sure, sure,
And
sure.
I think it's such a challenge for so
Mm.
many of us, and we do it, and people think, oh, they don't seem to just, they seem to be able to do it, and yet they
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
see
yeah.
the
Oh,
behind the scenes,
y- y-
like of like sweating
yeah,
and editing and
yeah,
it
yes.
fascinates me absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why I did this. So I think you speak to so many, like I really do. And that actually leads to my next question, or one of them, was that you recently did a fantastic joint post with another wonderful soul on Substack called Grace Grossman, called Six Brave Shifts for Showing Up Authentically Online from Private to Public and Posting with Purpose. And it's a great article. I'll put the link, under this video. Um, but one of the things that's mentioned in there, and I think it was Grace that said this, is that I don't give a flying fuck about what people think. She's kind of at that wonderful
Right, right,
stage,
right.
I want to be like that when I'm all grown up. Um,
Yeah.
So I would love for you to speak with your kind of psychoanalyst, psychiatrist's hat on, and
Mm.
speak to that, because I think even the expression, feel the fear and do it anyway, is something that I have a love relationship with. I get it, and so I loved the book, read that many years ago. But also for those of us who have had kind of nervous systems hardwired to fear judgment, to fear getting it wrong, to kind of, all of that is, or
Yeah,
to just be fully themselves, to be fully myself, uh, the feel the fear and do it anyway mantra doesn't always cut the mustard. So
yeah,
how can we work with that in the body so that we can create more capacity within our systems to feel safe, to
yeah.
show up and not care less about what people think? Sorry,
Well,
that was a lot of words.
no worries. And I'll hit upon a few thoughts which may not hit anything upon, what's in that article. So maybe I will. Um, do it anyway. I think in the body, right? I think my training has been very kind of in the mind, and in terms of watching, kind of what people do with conflict and helping them understand that. And I think kind of in the last few years, kind of the somatic elements, I think Grace does a lot of yoga, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what she helps do and teach, at least runs classes or something like that, where I think you've mentioned you've um, done some training in regard to meditation, right? And so those are two elements, I think of somatic work, or the body, in terms of where does the anxiety, the fear, where does it show up in the body, so to speak, or I think it was Basil van der Kolk, I think, kind of I forget what his book is.
The,
Body keeps the score.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the
What is the
body
book?
keeps the score. So I think after my training, at some point, I started to help people kind of figure out other elements of, well, I can help them understand, what they're doing in regard to anxiety. I can help them understand, where that may have developed, say, in terms of internal family systems, right? Where they grew up and what did they internalize. And, if there's anything kind of I know about human nature, is that we're creatures of repetition and habit. We're going to
Mm,
repeat something. We don't have choices about it. You might have a choice in terms of whether you're going to repeat healthy things or not healthy things. As we age, you hope you have more of a ability to understand how to move towards healthy repetition. But how does anxiety show up in the body when you were a kid? But I could ask you about, okay, well, you think back in terms of your kind of religious upbringing to whatever degree, and where did the anxiety show up in your body? All right. And then I could ask you to tell me about, well, where does it show up now?
mm,
Similar, different? How do you work with it to help yourself lower your physiology, right? To feel more centered and connected to yourself in a way that you want, not as scared. But that's a journey, right? That
yeah.
I think that's and it's and I think, right, it's like for a lot of us, it's like a daily thing. Like during the pandemic, I started I took an extra hour off every day from my work, lunch break, and I go hiking down the street every day because I want to lower my physiology. I want to be out in nature. I want to ease my physiology and not think about what I'm trained to think about in a certain kind of way.
Mm.
Um, so that's one piece. Another piece is feel the fear and why do it anyway. Um, I think in there it's like, well, if you want to get less anxious, I suppose you could think about it like getting a cut where it gets infected, and somewhere in there you got to kind of clean it out before it gets better. But when you go to clean it out, it's more painful for a period of time, right? So the analogy would be is, well, you gotta put yourself in relation to something that's a little more painful, maybe to learn about it, learn about yourself, learn what you've done to see if you can kind of work with it, understand it. Maybe over time you might learn to get a little less anxious, or in the body, what do you do when you do get anxious? How do you decompress, to take a break,
Mm.
meditate, depending. But I think there's certain things that people may not be able to do in life in terms of move forward and access their yearnings and desires and actually achieve some of them to whatever degree that's possible, right? Without having some fear and continuing to do it anyway. Right. So,
Mm.
I think there's an adaptive piece. I do think you can overstimulate people. You can put them in traumatic situations. People don't know what they're doing. Like, well, yeah, here we're going to get together and we're going to go do it all together. And it's like, okay, well, you might end up with some trauma. You might, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
depends. I appreciate the mindset behind it, but I, often think, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And I think for me, I don't know whether you have ever come across this in your work. I've not yet. I'm yet to meet anyone who has like a lot of people before they do something that's slightly out of in their stretch zone, say, they will get
Yes,
a
yes.
lot of nerves and
Yeah.
anxiety, and they'll be like, oh, can I do this? And then afterwards they'll feel relief, and there'll be an element of pride for most
Yes.
people,
Yes.
is what I've witnessed, that
Yeah.
I did the thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
get that. I will
Ah,
go into, like,
yes.
there will be just like a shame spiral after
Yes.
anything
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that is, or
Yes.
can be brutal.
Yeah. 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 Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I
Yes.
don't know whether that's something you've come across
No,
in your work,
yeah, I have.
like a kind
And
of vulnerability hangover, post-expression
no,
anxiety.
absolutely. No, no, because if you get enough, if you get enough anxiety, stress placed on us, for a long period of time, or in an intense heightened way, it's like, yeah, we can numb out. I get, that there may have, for you with narcolepsy, right, that there may have been a physiological
Yeah,
medical component, what I mean? But at what point, given in terms of if I go do something, if I'm going to get anxious, for me, there are points where it's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to go take a nap. Right. I'm gonna, what I mean? I'm gonna take a shower, heat my body up, cool it down because it produces a natural relaxation response, right?
right.
That's part of cooling the body. If you heat it up a little bit, cool it down, it'll heat up by a degree or so, half a degree, and cool down, and it produces a natural relaxation
Mm,
response. And then I want to go take a nap because I just don't want to be overstimulated,
mm,
right? I can feel sick to my stomach. I can feel like it's not good for me.
yeah.
You know what I mean? But how much of that is, it's not good for me in terms of, well, yeah, okay, maybe not. But what happens if I don't learn to move forward? I'm not going to get, and so there's a bit of like, kind of when I say, kind of what I specialize in is the, mind in conflict. It's like, well, there you go. It's like, well, yeah, I might get something I want. Like maybe I want to be able to put a podcast out there. I've been on a podcast. I've not done a podcast. I've been told maybe down the road, maybe I need to do that. And I'm like, oh, great. One more thing I need to do. But I assume, right, there's probably some enjoyable things about it. But as you hit upon, well, geez, maybe also it could produce this shame spiral, and
Mm,
maybe over time, maybe that isn't good for my physiology.
mm,
And so, what do I do? It's like, I don't know, maybe I'll meditate beforehand. I know some professors who come to see me, and they will, before having to give a talk at a conference, paper, that they'll take beta blockers, so that it lowers their heart rate, and so they don't feel as anxious while they're doing
Right.
it. So they're doing something, with their body to help them not feel overwhelmed and overstimulated.
Mm.
I don't know, I'll ask you a question, right? For you and the shame and the physiology, it's like, well, does the meditation help with that?
It, it helps in the lead up to anything, and I find it a fantastic tool always. When there's a very severe backlash after something I've done, trying to think of the last time that was the case. And then meditation is perhaps I would say more traumatic because it just does
Ah,
it. I
yeah.
then need
Yes.
to
Okay.
shake or have
Yeah.
a cold shower, or
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I think that's when the bringing the body into it is really important for me.
Yeah.
Stretching, things like that.
Well, and so so I ask a question in terms of, so right, you probably know that for a lot of people, it's like that meditation can, for certain individuals, have a propensity to lower your heart rate. I mean, I get you can be too much in your mind, but there's a way after about 20 minutes of meditation, right? You can get into a physiological thing that kind of slows your brain waves down,
Yeah,
kind of mimics aspects of sleep a little bit. But then if it doesn't produce that for you in that moment, and if it's, becomes too overstimulating, it's like, oh, okay, well, now what else do I need to do to
yeah,
contend with my condition?
yeah, yeah,
Right. And so I think that's an element of where I would help people explore, not so much that I'm like, hey, this is the answer in terms of, self-help book, in terms of, do these 10 things and you're going to feel less anxious. It's like, well, maybe, but
yeah. Maybe
that's the
not.
finger. Hey, oh, exactly. That's the
Yeah,
fingerprint. We're all a little
yeah,
different. And so that would be, whether it's the cold shower or whatever it is for you, that helps kind of with the shame and the inner critic, or, whatever those things are. It's like,
mm,
I can imagine, given what you've kind of, shared, at least, what's out there already on Substack, the whole
um,
shame and figuring out what helps to kind of not have as much of it at
yeah.
points. I would imagine that's a pretty important journey that you're still figuring out.
Yeah, it's an ongoing journey for sure. I
Right,
think I'll
right,
be unraveling a lot of shit
right,
for the rest of
right.
my days.
Well, and that's, and that's what that's what I think. It's like, man, I got to get up and do it again. It's our farm's life, whatever those things are. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, TV. Oh, Bronze, I'm so aware of your time. Is there anything you would love to share on this, on your own struggles with this, or on being the kind of the fullest expression of who we are? Because that's what we're here for, surely, is to create the to return to the truest essence of who we are. And yet those things can kind of roll so easily off the tongue. And sometimes it's an entirely different thing, isn't it, in kind of uprooting the old patterns and whatnot. Is there anything you would have to share on this?
Well, I think, on that note, kind of that the goal, right, in some ways, right, to be the truest expression of ourselves. Like, I don't know if there's research out there on it, but I'd love to read some studies in terms of, you know, what do people mean by that? And
Yeah.
my sense often, kind of in the way that I think about some of this self-help genre, is that it often gets expressed as kind of the positive elements of the best parts of ourselves.
Mm,
Right. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get that. I try to help people understand,
mm,
what some of those things are, and how to get it, and how to be more authentic, and to have one, voice, and to learn how to speak up. And if you're angry, that's fine, but let's, let's try to help with the tone. Let's not knock your leg out from under you, right? So that you can articulate things in a more mature fashion. I get all that, but as if kind of like fear and anxiety and the twist in the water flow, as if that's not also a true expression,
Yes.
of who I am as well. It's like,
Um,
when you think of wholeness, I get it, but that's like the whole complexity gamut of human emotion, and there's a fair amount of them that's not so pretty. It's
mm,
speak, what I mean? And I know, so for me, I think I've kind of not like in some ways, I mentioned, earlier we were talking before, we get online, that I became a psychoanalyst. And so that was like going to see someone 5 days a week on the couch, person can't see me, 6.5 years, and so there was like an intimacy to that, both with myself and with my analyst, in terms of, living through things that I couldn't escape, and the hell, and living through that in various different ways over time. But it was like a, somewhat a private endeavor, so to speak,
mm,
where I think Substack, has raised some of my authentic true self in regard to excitement, in terms of, you know I can kind of, something you said earlier reminded me. I did a live, a couple weeks ago, maybe month and a half. I'm not quite sure exactly. Um, but I was pretty anxious about it, and I got through it and got done with it. And there was this feeling, of feeling proud, in a way that, even when I became a psychoanalyst, and that was a huge achievement for me, probably one of the biggest I've ever had. And yet I didn't feel proud of myself in the same way I did when I did it live. And I hadn't expected it. And I had, I knew enough in terms of, hey, I don't, like, I can't remember the last time I felt proud of myself. I mean, in that kind of like way that's important, right? That you look at a little kid, right? I don't
mm.
care if, the kid does a triple axel, or, something, skating or gymnastics, or home run in baseball, or, kicks the goal, wins the game in football. Is it, man, you want that kid? I mean, I'm proud of you, kid. I'm proud of you. And I want to, tell, I don't kiss myself, right? Like I have cousins, like tell, I'm proud of you. But there was a weird, oh, this is, I'm proud of myself.
Mm.
And it was very nice. It was like endearing, right? And it was like, oh, I help other people experience some of that, hopefully, along the way.
Yeah. Oh, I love that story. I'm
No,
so glad that you shared that.
but it was like, to get it, I feel like I've had to kind of walk through hell,
Mm.
and I don't want to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like it was like, I
Yeah.
enjoyed that moment. That was great. I don't want to walk through hell again for another 2 years, 3 years to
When
get it. And then,
yes.
it's like, hey, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But you never know, that's pretty meaningful. That's an element of my experience, of my true self, and kind of meeting up with more wholeness, more
Mm.
healing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And a kid who stuttered, and you know what I mean, had to go to like, you got to get removed. You got to go down to the special ed teacher, and you got to learn how to read, right? And so I'm like, I don't want me to go talk in public, so I don't
And
know.
live. Live,
maybe.
Bronce.
Well, and then I
Live.
feel more, exactly. And it's like, well, okay, what I mean, but it has a, and it has a and and I'm like, fair enough. That's, I mean, it's that's an element of life, So that's, I think there's like a lot of different emotions that come up for me as I'm in the midst of kind of Substack in various ways,
Mm,
which for me does feel like healing in some kind of way.
yeah.
I don't know how else I put it, So yeah,
Yeah, God, I love everything you've said there because I think there is this element of, especially in the, I hate labels, but in the kind of quote unquote spiritual world,
yeah,
there can be
yes,
like
yes,
a
yes,
real
yes,
demonization of
yes.
all of the emotions.
Oh, no,
And
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
I
yes.
think to a
Yeah.
degree,
Sin, sin.
I've,
Yes.
yeah, I think to a degree, I've kind of, actually rather than integrating parts of myself in recent years in demonizing certain parts
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
I've actually kind of tossed them away further and I think
Sure. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
that kind of sense of
Uh-huh.
this is
Uh-huh.
good, that's bad, this is black, that's
Yeah.
that, rather than seeing it all as rather all you mentioned internal family systems before. Well, there's kind of no greater example than that, is there, of kind of bringing it all back to love and wholeness. And it's when we
Uh-huh.
do that, then we can feel that kind of element of pride when we do show up on a live or do something that is brave, for us. I
Yeah.
think it's quite magic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, yeah. I was going to
Well, no.
say, could you speak to, before we go, could you, I
Yeah.
just love your little figurine in the background, and you were telling me about it before, and it feels like very apt at this moment. Ah,
Yeah. So, so,
that's
so
magic.
it's it is made out of jigsaw puzzle pieces, right? It's a person, and there's kind of like metal wire, and the jigsaw puzzle pieces are attached, to the metal in various ways. But the person, top of their head, right? It's opening up. It kind of looks a little bit like a funnel, right? But you could think about it in terms of, someone's mind being blown, maybe expanding,
Mm.
opening up, to new possibilities, to new realities. And so that's a little bit about what I think, I might hope for myself and other people, in therapy that come to see me, right? And I have my own therapist,
Mm.
right? That I go
Yeah.
see. His name's Mel. You know what I mean? And so I have a few of those jigsaw expanding mind experiences with him at points,
Ah.
right? So that's the kind of the symbolism of
Yeah, I
that.
love that. I love it. I've seen that
Yeah.
on your Substack, on pictures on Substack, and I'm like, I want to know more about that figurine. Oh, Bronze, I'm so grateful for your time
Yeah.
and for your tender teachings and writings and your just your humanness. I'm so grateful for that. I can't begin to express that enough, and for your time today too. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And what I'll mention is, I'm happy to come back down the road at some point and do a part two.
Yeah.
For me, like given what I do for a living, right, in the space that I'm already in, and I just ended with someone, as I mentioned, before we started, like I ended with, the last person of the day. And so this is the last thing for me. And so it's a strange thing for me to like then talk with someone in terms of like, okay, because normally I would ask you like more questions about shame and, how do you deal with it? How's it come up?
Yeah.
And I'm like, uh,
That's
this.
why I love being the host of a podcast, because you don't have to
Right,
talk.
right, right. Well,
Although I did say a lot of
right,
words at some points
right,
today, for
right,
which
right,
I
right.
apologize. But yeah,
No,
bless you.
so I appreciate you asking me here. I appreciate you giving me the time, and I
Um,
appreciate for me, the well thought out questions, that you've asked, and it has this kind of I don't know what like for me I think given that you were raised in the religious element to whatever degree and I was as well. And if you were to think about something at least hopefully good in the mix of kind of something spiritual, like I have felt like that there's some kind of I want there to be kind of like a sacred space
Yeah.
in discussing what it means to be whole and kind of wrestling with the human condition. So I appreciate the questions that you've asked and the space that you provide for other people, because I do think very meaningful. So,
Ah, bless
so
you, Bronce.
I appreciate your time.
Ah, no, I appreciate your time.
Thank
And I wish you a really beautiful weekend. Hey, thank you.
you. I'm gonna go
It's a
spend
shame
some time.
actually we're not down the road from each other because I feel like now
There
we
you
could go
go.
for a cup of tea and have some
Yeah,
London rag pie or whatever
there
it
you
is
go.
we're
Hey,
having tonight.
you could, you're right. No, you go for tea, and I'd go for espresso. Nice.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Thank you so much, Buds. Bless you. Thank you.